Hi, it's Tom with Heritage Electrical. In this video I'd like to just show you some of the differences between a budget outdoor light fitting and a slightly more premium product. So although these products aren't exactly the same, the one on the left is our budget option. It's a more decorative wall washing light. The fitting on the right hand side is a security floodlight with a built-in PIR. Nevertheless, there's a lot of overlap between the two products. So the one on the left will cost you between £20 and £25. The one on the right is more like £60 to £65. So it's quite a big difference, but let's just go through some of those differences now. So we start off with the budget fitting. Now this doesn't have an integrated LED. You need to provide your own lamps. So you need to screw off the top and the bottom, and I think it's a GU10 fitting. Now this fitting is Ip44 rated, which means, well, IP is ingress protection, and it's the level of protection provided with regards to the ingress of either solid objects or liquid water. So Ip44 is the minimum rating required for outdoor lighting and things of that nature. So what does Ip44 mean? Well, the first four relates to the protection against ingress of solid objects. So this 4 represents protection against a solid object greater than 1mm in size. Now the second 4 of the Ip44 relates to the protection against water ingress, and this is protected against water splashed from all directions, limited ingress permitted. So Ip44 is the minimum, like I say. But what we find the vast majority of the time is that whenever we fit or we come across Ip44 outdoor light fittings, they generally fail within a year. You'll either be replacing lamps or the fitting itself. The seals will fail, and ultimately, the fitting itself will fail. And more often than not, actually, if they have an integrated PIR, that's often the thing that lets water in, and you'll find that connections get shorted out, and either the light will be on permanently or it just won't turn on. Now with this particular fitting, every time you need to change a lamp, you unscrew the lid, screw it back on again, you will be compromising the rubber grommet, which is designed to provide that IP rating. Sooner or later that will perish and fail. Now from an installer's perspective, the enclosure at the back does not provide a great deal of space for making connections off properly. Usually the manufacturer will provide a very small grommet permitting a very small twin and earth cable, a single twin and earth cable into the back of the enclosure. Now in our case, the customer wants a switch override for the lighting so that it works on PIR, but if he wants it on permanently, there's a switch override for that. So we need to run 2 3-core cables to this fitting, because this is partway through our chain of lights, partway through the run. So there's 2 cables at this fitting, and so those 2 cables, they're too big for the grommet provided, and so we have needed to go around and seal this ourselves using silicone sealant after installation. We also need to use Wago connectors because the terminal block provided, the screw terminal block, is just not big enough to get the connections in securely. Often in these enclosures, if there's integrated LEDs or PIR sensors, there'll be control gear for that. You can see there's a big box in the back there, which is actually taking up a good half to 2/3 of the available space for making the connections, which means I'm having to tuck the cables either side of it and just cut cables really short so I can get my Wago connectors in there and make these proper connections. You see that big nut on the back of the bracket that's holding the light on, that also fouls on the cables. And finally, the IP rating is achieved by this rubber grommet, which it's not held in place, and it tends to sort of want to pop off as I'm trying to offer the light fitting up to the bracket, to the enclosure that it's fixed on. So there's often a lot of extra time involved in putting these cheaper fittings in. For those reasons, we need to adjust them to make sure that they remain watertight, and also there's a lot of messing around trying to get the connections in the back of these very small enclosures that are often provided. Finally, when I tighten the screw up to hold the enclosure in place, to get any sort of tightness, you see the outer edge of that enclosure is bending slightly. So the sort of box that's mounted to the wall is slightly smaller than the shroud, the enclosure that goes over the top of that box that's fixed to the wall. And so when I screw the outer box to the inner box, there's a certain amount of bending, which is not ideal. Now if we move on to the more expensive fitting, you see it's an integrated fitting. It's got two 8-watt LEDs, so that doesn't sound like a lot, but they do actually give out quite a lot of light. Now on the back there you can see there's some very substantial heat sinks which dissipate heat, keep the LED running cooler. Now these come with a 3-year guarantee, but we've never been called back to any of these that we've fitted. So even though the lamps aren't exchangeable, you are going to get a good long lifespan out of these. Now these are angleable as well. Again, it's like I say, it's a slightly different product from the decorative wall washing light, but it's a nice feature to have. And the PIR at the bottom is a completely sealed unit. Now these are actually Ip44 rated, so the first 5, again, that's ingress protection against solids, and the 5 relates to dust protected, so it permits a very small amount of dust in, but nothing larger than that. The 5 with regards to the water ingress, it's protected against jets of water, so it's a lot more waterproof than the Ip44, which is protected against water splashed. It's going to last a lot longer in our harsh northwestern England weather conditions. This comes with a bracket. Now you screw the bracket to the wall. Unlike the cheaper fitting, can you see how the screws are actually located outside of the enclosure? So there's no way that water can get through screw holes into the enclosure. There's plenty of space to make off cables in there. You can see that it's a screw terminal block. There's a lot of space underneath that though. I've managed to get a little sort of bend in the cables, a little swoop, leave that extra bit just in case they need to be re-terminated at any point. I've not needed to use Wago connectors, and I could have easily got, even though this is the last fitting in the chain of lights that we've got a couple in a row, I could have quite easily got 2 cables terminated in there. Now the cheaper fitting, the screw holes that you actually attach the back plate to the wall with are located inside the enclosure, so that's a place for water to get in and potentially track across that screw and into the enclosure. What happens then is you just click, the entire unit plugs in to the screw terminal block, and there's a couple of plastic catches either side which give you a very satisfying click, and then they are held in place. It's very easy to remove the fitting for testing purposes from an installer's perspective, if any maintenance needs to take place. So as we've said in quite a few videos, although the initial outlay for some of these more expensive materials is more, you are actually probably saving yourself some labour costs, because the cheaper materials often take longer to install. Plus you're getting a superior product as well, which is most likely going to have a longer lifespan than a cheaper alternative.